Hi guys, Seawolf here. I decided to create a video to show off the new features from ConverseTek 1.5 and extended conversations 0.5. So these are two quite big and powerful updates, and I thought I'd just run you through them. So if we start on the left and look at the changelog for ConverseTek 1.5, you can see a lot of work went into this release. Coming off the 1.4 release, which was also a large release, this one I was able to concentrate on the features. So while 1.4 was more bringing the project up to date and modernizing it, as well as adding lots of new features, the whole focus of release 1.5 is just adding new features really, and fixing a few small bugs. The focus of this release was around the node management and interacting with the dialog tree and the dialog editor. So as you can see, there are a lot of features, improvements, and a few bug fixes here. So the plan for this video is to try to briefly go over each one of these features, or most of them, highlighting how you use it and why it's useful to you. And for extended conversations, I want to particularly highlight the new action that's being added called sideload conversation. Okay, with that, let's boot up ConverseTek. So here's ConverseTek 1.5. You can see down the bottom right, it says 1.5, and you can see it there in the About. So if we open up the just one of our conversation folders, we actually have nothing in there right now. So we're going to create a new conversation, my conversation. So one of the immediate things you'll notice is that this core conversation node has changed, it's been renamed. It used to be called root because that was actually wrong. It's not a root, it's the core, because you actually create roots underneath it like this. So these are the root. You'll notice when you right click and to say add nodes, it actually gives you more information. It actually says the correct terms like add prompt node, add response node, and things like that. So one thing you might also notice now is when you actually have a file that's modified, you'll have a little star next to it to show that it's a modified file. So just a small indicator that it's been changed. What you can do as well is if you're getting too busy in your conversations, so if we open up say one of the vanilla conversation files, we go to get Darius, and you can see this conversation it's very large and it's very hard to track. So one of the cool features in ConverseTek 1.5 is you're able to isolate a certain branch, removes all the clutter, allows you to concentrate on exactly what you want to look at. So say we're interested in this little bit here. We don't really want everything else around us. So what we can do is we can right click it and say isolate branch. And when we do that, it throws away all the clutter. It's not really thrown away, but just hides it. And you can work and do all your tasks in here like you would normally do. Yeah, in there. So that's very useful. And when we want to go back to the main mode, you can go right click on this top core node and go back to conversation. Just say that you've gone into the isolated mode and you realize you've not been as specific as you want to be. You can keep drilling down into isolation modes. There's only one depth to it, so you'll always go back to the main conversation, but it just allows you to further isolate the nodes that you're going into, for instance. So, and when you're ready to leave, right click, back to conversation, and you're back there. So as you noticed, as I mentioned before, now we have a little star next to the conversation. If you try to select off it and you haven't saved it, what used to happen, you'd lose all your changes. Now you get prompted to say, ConverseTek realizes you've got unsaved changes, would you like to save it? You can still select no, and it will do the same behavior as before. You'll throw away your changes, but you actually have the option of not losing your changes. In this case, I'm just going to say no, I don't want to save those changes. Another useful feature, especially on the large conversations, is if you have, again, you're working within a branch and you don't really care about the rest, you could go into isolation mode, but if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, and you want to keep the rest easily accessible, you can right-click and say collapse other branches, and that does exactly what you'd expect. It closes all the other branches except from the node you selected, its parents and its children. So you're able to get a good vision of the logic of how you reached that node. Additionally, you also have expand and collapse. So you can expand and collapse using these kind of handles, the plus and minus handles, but you'll notice you see that it's a shallow close. So it just closes that one node. Everything else under it is technically still expanded. So when you open it again, it's all there. But if for whatever reason you want to actually fully collapse everything, you can right-click and say collapse branch. And if you open it now, you'll notice now individually they are all closed. But if you wanted to say reopen them all again, so if I collapse that branch and then I can select expand branch, it will expand them all. So you don't need to manually open them all. Some of you might have noticed already that the hover over color has changed. So now it used to be blue and gold depending on what node you're on. That gave a few problems when you were zooming out and you lost visibility of really where you were. It wasn't so clear. So now it's a green color. Now this can be configured in a settings file under your ConverseTek config colors JSON file. You can define any colors you want. It was also made a bit darker and stronger as you zoom out because you would be losing sight of it on zoom out. So you can still see here it's still clear. But you can also change the color, make it a bright pink, red, whatever works for you. So I think the long-term plan will be to expand what colors you can configure. Right now it's just a highlight. Probably as time goes on, I'll let more colors be configured. So. When you're deleting nodes, you used to just delete it. But since the addition of more menu options on the right-click menu, I decided that that was a bit too dangerous and there'd be a higher risk of people just deleting things they didn't want. So now you get a confirmation of when you're deleting a node. You can confirm or cancel. Same thing with the links. You'll have a dedicated message for that too, for the link. Just so people don't get confused and think that by deleting a link, the rest of the nodes that are being linked to will get deleted, because that's not the case. Only the link gets deleted. So we have hotkeys. You can press Control and S, and that will save a conversation. So if I do it now, you can see there, save successful. Yeah, and now you actually have a dependency check. So if you were loading a conversation that, for instance, used as extended conversations and you didn't have the correct definitions, you have a new little message that pops up saying which definition is missing, telling you how to install it. There are a few more buttons now that exist that didn't used to. So you can see on the top left here, you actually have this blue one. This just expands and collapses everything. It's kind of a common feature in tools. You also have the one next to it, which is a go-to node. Now this kind of goes hand in hand with how changes have made to the selection. So if I talk about that first, so you're able to select a node, and when you select off it, in the old version it used to just hide the node details and unhighlight the node. Now it keeps this highlight now, so you're able to click once off it. You can kind of look around if you want, and if you need to come back to the node you were in before, you can select this top left button and it will take you back to the node you were. If you don't want that anymore, you can either press the escape key or you can click on the grey one more time and it will fully disable it, and you can see there's no longer a target to go to anymore. And with that, it's a good point to talk about if in the old versions, if you were going to a node that was hidden. So if I hide this selected node, when you used to try to go to node from maybe a link, because that was the only way you could do it in the old days, then it wouldn't be able to find it properly because it would be hidden by the branches. Now if you go to it by a link, or as other button down here, the same thing, go to node, you select that, it will actually expand the branch that selected node is on, so you're able to actually visualize it and actually go to it properly. So small thing. So when you have an auto scroll, the direction you're coming from, you're originating from, actually matters now. So before, if you, for instance, went to a link, it would always be going to the top of the screen. That was the only auto scroll we had before. So if I just show you now, I select this node. If I scroll up and go to node, it will stop at the bottom of the screen because you're scrolling from top down. And if I scroll out down the bottom and I go to node, it will stop on the top. It just helps keep a relative position, helps the user have a feel for where nodes are in relation to each other. So yeah, that's a small feature. Another small thing is, some of you might notice already, there are these nodes now that have arrows on them. This will show up now anytime you have an empty node, so you can see there's nothing here. So if I typed anything, hello, that arrow disappears. It's purely there for a visual indicator to say that this node is an auto-follow node. So the way the BattleTech conversation system works is that if it encounters a node that has no text, it considers it an auto-follow. So it will just move on to the next node. This helps the user visualize that rather than just having an empty node. There was another feature. So on large conversations, what would happen in previous versions, you'd have this horizontal snapping that would throw you off visually. The reason being is this list is virtualized, so you only have maybe the top. You have the viewable area, and you have a few nodes above it and a few nodes below it that get loaded in. So what was happening is, as these nodes were unloading, the large horizontal nodes, when you would scroll down, suddenly the side maximum width of the screen would become smaller, and it would snap you back. Now you're able to seamlessly scroll down and not have this weird snapping issue. It helps you keep your position mentally within the conversation without getting thrown around a lot. Yeah, another thing that some of you might have noticed, that links now have a truncated preview of where you're linking to. So before, you just have this example here of a empty link. You wouldn't really know, if you're in a large conversation, you really wouldn't know where that goes. You just know it's a link to somewhere until you click it and go there. Now, if there is some text there, you're able to visualize and see roughly where that will go. So I know, okay, I've wrote that prompt somewhere else. Okay, I know that's going to go. Sure thing, Commander. Okay, I have a rough idea where that's going to go. And if you need more information, you can click it, and it will take you to where you need to go. So. Another thing that was requested and was quite annoying is if you selected a node that would have been hidden by the node details, so when it pops up, you would have to manually then kind of scroll back down to it because it's hidden. Now, if you select a node that would be hidden, so if I select this node here, you'll notice the screen realizes it's going to be hidden, that node, and it will scroll up to keep it visible for you. So you can see there. So you don't have to do that little scroll every single time if it's going to be hidden. So that's ConverseTek 1.5. It's a big productivity increase. And a lot of the features there are just really to help you work within this node tree that can get very large, very confusing and unmanageable. And it'll allow you to speed up your work, and it will allow you to remove the clutter when you need to, and generally just prevent any mistakes that the tool allowed you to make. So like deleting things by accident, losing data, and I'm trying to make this a better experience. So now I'd like to go into the extended conversation 0.5 release, specifically the sideload conversation action. So this allows you to load into another conversation while you have an active conversation going on, and you're able to go into the sideloaded conversation file seamlessly, where you wouldn't immediately realize you've gone into another conversation. And the point of this is allows you to better manage very large conversation files. If you have a lot of conditional statements, branching logic, it gets very, very messy, confusing to manage all that. Now going forward, modders will be able to create a kind of a host conversation, a kind of parent conversation, and then guide the logic into the different conversation files themselves rather than having these large branches. So then each branch could be a conversation file, and there could even be further branching into conversation files in those branches too. So it allows also multiple people to work in one large conversation file because well, they'll be working in their own binary file in the conversation format, so there won't be any conflicts. So with that, just as a point note, it's recommended that when you do apply this action, you apply it on a response, so on the yellow nodes. It does work on the prompts, but it's just not as good, and I'll get into that in a second. So if we go back to ConverseTek, here's an example I've set up, and I'll walk you through the three different examples. So the first one is that we have this kind of host conversation, and Darius is going to tell us he's going to sideload a conversation. So if we have a look at that, we've set it on the response node here, and you have a look at the action, and you can see I've selected sideload conversation action. I've given it the conversation ID of what I want to load, which is the second one on the left here. So you can see it ends in e1.4, and you can see in the top left here that's e1.4, so it's just that ID there. So we're going back to the host conversation, go back to that action. I'll go into the second option in a minute. Entry node ID, we'll have another example that goes over that. You have a choice of also returning back to this conversation, but I'll go into that. That's example number 2. So all we need to know about is sideload conversation, and we give it the conversation ID. So what we should see is once that's side loaded in, if we load the side loaded conversation, it should enter into this and go into the first root and say, hello, we're in a side loaded conversation, great news. And that should be the end of it. So if we get our BattleTech open and go into, this is the beginnings of one of my mods called Dead Claim campaign mod I'm making. So if we go into the survey center and we talk to Darius, and we go into example 1, as we follow the logic, he tells us he's going to sideload a conversation. Now we're in the sideloaded conversation, as you can see here. Yeah, great news. Now when I click this, this should end the conversation. Perfect. So that's exactly what we wanted. So if we go into example 2, it's the same type of thing here. We're going to we have an action here. Darius is going to put a sideloader into the conversation, but this time we want to, when that sideloaded conversation finishes, we want to return back into the original branch that we were in. So we do the same thing, we apply an action, we've got the conversation ID in there, we leave entry node ID empty because we don't care about this for now, we want to go into the root of the sideloaded conversation. But we do say we want this to be true, resume host after sideload finished. Just basically means return back to the conversation that sideloaded it. Okay, so what should happen is then we should get to this point. Let's do it. That will load the sideloaded conversation, and then when that's finished, it will come back and we'll say, and we're back in the original conversation. So let's give that a go. So example 2 is Darius. He's about to load the conversation. We do this. Here we go. Hello, we're in the sideloaded conversation. Great news. And then we go back to the original conversation. So you're able to jump into side conversations and come back in when you want to, when those ones finish. Great. And the last example I want to show is, again, along the same idea. We have the sideload action on a response, the yellow node. Now this time we're setting entry node ID. This you have the tooltip there, but basically that says you can enter into a very specific prompt when you're loading into the sideloaded conversation. So this ID corresponds with an ID, a node inside the sideloaded conversation. So we open that up. So we can see the second branch here. We wouldn't normally be able to access this with how we've set up our conversation. If you had conditions and things like that, you could get onto it, but not how we've set things up. So you can see this says you should never see me, you should never see me, because we shouldn't be going through this logic route. But we should enter in exactly onto this node because that's the ID that I've taken. So what you would do is you'd find a node you'd want to go into or start from. You copy that node and then you'll put it into the sideload action under entry node ID. So that's the one we've used there. So if we boot up the game again and go back into example 3, we're going to go into sideloaded conversation. Great. And now he says, yeah, right, we've entered into a node that is in a specific point in the sideloaded conversation. That's exactly the node we selected. So we didn't see anything from the first root and branch from the sideloaded conversation. We didn't see the first 2 nodes of the second root either, but we've gone straight into that third node. Great. You can return back to the original conversation. So with that, that's the most important things I wanted to show off. I hope whoever uses ConverseTek and extended conversations enjoys this release. I think it makes it a lot safer to use. You won't lose much data. It will speed up the way you work, better management, and generally we should get more out of things with using the new tools and extended conversation action. So thanks a lot. Until next time.